Yes.
Okay, thank you for your patience.
Another board meeting.
Okay, it looks like we're finally recording and have our citizens present. Can we call the meeting to order? Would you do the roll call, please, Liz?
Janine LeBron.
Here.
Marty Mayo.
Here.
John Reiser.
Here.
Lisa Pappas.
Here.
Jim Redmond.
Yep,
Bill Weber.
Here.
And I am here, and Barry Lonick.
He's full complement today, how about it?
Okay, yeah, that's great. Approval of the agenda. Now, we may have a slight addition here. Tim, how much time do you think you're going to take for your little presentation?
Well, it depends on how much, go around it takes, but
And where this is in open session.
let's say 5 to 10.
Okay, and we'll put you under new business then, before the consultant's report.
Sure.
And
Now, this handout probably should be part of a packet so that people can see it. So, because we're supposed to make handouts available to people who are joining.
let's attach it to our minutes then.
Yeah.
from this
Okay.
meeting.
Exactly.
All right, we'll do that. Great.
So any other changes to the agenda? Hearing none, may we have a vote to approve the agenda?
So moved. And support.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, and then approval of the minutes of our last meeting. Were there any comments or additions or corrections? Hearing none, can we have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Tim?
Support.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, good, making progress. Public comments. Do any of our visitors via Zoom have anything to say? Are you there?
We are, and it looks like there was a nice burn at 300 North Zeeb, and it looks like they're done now, and that's nice to see.
That's all the smoke we're seeing in the area?
Yes.
Yeah, that's quite a bit. All right. Anna, I see we have you. Would you like to say anything? Or are you just observing?
Hi, I'm Anna Cohn, Director of the Parks Department, and I'm just observing today, just hoping to be more involved with LPC. Not much to say.
Thank you for
Yeah,
coming.
thanks.
All right. Any other comments?
Anna's good people. She's been at it for how many months or years now, Anna?
9 months.
And so she's the person primarily in charge or charged with kind of when we acquire a property, it kind of goes to her department and paths and like she was there this Saturday as part of a kind of a work bee, Scio outdoors, I think it's called. Outside, sorry. She worked on the pathway, or some of us, I was there too, working on the pathway, pulling some garlic mustard, and she had a crew there, tools there, all that stuff. So she works hard not only during the day on behalf of Scio at these parks, but also on the weekend. So thank you, Anna, and welcome as the board rep.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
All right, let's go then to reports of other commissions. Was there a planning meeting that anyone attended?
I did.
Okay, tell us about it.
The 3 Bs, babies, books, and I'll remember the other one. But on Knight Road, there's a husband and wife that want to put in a daycare for up to 10 kids. And up to 6 you can do without permission. The state just allows you kind of by right, but between 6 to 12, you need a conditional land use, and the board approved that. The other thing was books, and on Parkland Plaza, the Ann Arbor District Library purchased a building that used to be a beverage warehouse, and they're going to retrofit that, kind of make that into space that they can use to store old books or warehouse, and have occasional events like a Lego competition or a robotics competition or book sales. And so that's the B. And they're going to put a pathway along the frontage of the property that goes north and south, and it stops just south of Honey Creek. That parcel is located on the east side of Parkland, south of Honey Creek. And they're going to put in a pathway to that creek, and then they'll work with the township to the extent we need to put a pathway either over that or take it across to the existing pathway on the west side of Parkland Plaza. That's a nice place because it goes to the, it's just north of Saginaw Forest. So, you know, at some point, people will be able to get from Jackson and the U of M there and the library there to the Scio View trailhead going into Saginaw Forest, and that's part of the Scio zone getting across Scio Township Trail that we here know about. And the final B is business, and that's taking a look at the Jackson Road overlay district. So you've got we just discussed that. There's in the ordinance, there's the J-Rod or that overlay district. And it's a little confusing because there's the map for the overlay district, there's a map for the DDA, and there's a map, maybe most importantly, where we have sewer and water. So it's kind of like, what do we want Jackson Road to look like in the future? And this is kind of an offshoot or a follow-up to Pittsfield Township Supervisor Mandy Graywall, who gave a presentation, and they've got some nice things going, some different things going, either on Michigan Avenue or, you know, that development that's kind of by, I say Buddy's Pizza. So they're kind of re-envisioning aspects of what they've got going on in their commercial district. So it was just a discussion point, no action. So that's it on planning.
Thank you. Next item is Parks, Pathways, and Preserves. Liz?
That's a hard one to follow,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I'm gonna try. That was really good, John. We met yesterday, Parks and Pathways. Anna is here. She's our head. John is now a Parks member, right? You're the board rep on the Parks PPP?
Non-voting, just I'm a liaison.
Right, okay. And so John was there also. The Parks Group has hired 4 summer interns to work for 3 months, 40 hours a week at $16.25 an hour. 2 of them are research interns, and they will be conducting a nesting bird survey? Breeding bird survey and an invasive plant survey in West Scio Preserve, with the idea that we can keep track of these numbers, and we hope the invasives go down and we just keep track of all these cool birds.
Is it the same student group that did it the last time?
No, I mean, that was Anna. Was
Oh,
one
that
of
was
them.
you.
She's our park director now. Yeah. And so, and she's starting a new department.
Yeah.
The other 2 are stewards. So this is really cool. We had really good candidates, 9 candidates. And I was part of the interview group. There were just a couple of us that volunteered to work with Anna on that. And it was super cool because these people that we interviewed and the 4 that we extended offers to were just highly motivated, really care about the outdoors, they referred to an ethic of the environment in multiple interviews. It was just the coolest thing ever. Very committed to what they're gonna do. So I hope everyone in this group will get a chance to meet them this summer. I think they start later this month, maybe around the 20th. And 2 in each position, 2 building trails, maintaining trails, pulling invasives, and 2 doing the bird survey and invasive plant survey. And then the other cool thing we talked about was play spaces in our parks. There's somebody you may know by the name of Alan Samuels. He is a Scio resident, and he teaches in the Stamp School of Art and Design. And so he has volunteered to design accessible play spaces for various Scio parks and preserves. The idea is to make nature available to anyone who wants to enjoy it. And so those discussions are just beginning. But the hope is to develop play areas and themes maybe throughout that are consistent through a particular park, that are consistent with the pros plan and easy maintenance and that sort of thing. So to pull people into the parks. So that is my report.
Okay, good, thank you. Any questions?
The sustainability task force on it, you might know about this, is that there was a group of 6 or 7 Cs students that helped on that report and to reach out. And 2 of them are gonna hang in for the summertime. Is that the same 2 people that are
Different.
different?
Yeah, so I think overall we'll have 6 intern/summer staff.
Excellent,
Yeah.
great.
Well, there has been some talk about a joint session with Parks, Pathways, and Preserves and LPC. And I wonder, is that still an ongoing discussion? Is that still something that the Parks, Pathways people are interested in?
I can't speak for them, but speaking for myself, I think that's very wise and we should plan it.
Okay, but just in summary, what might be some of the things on the agenda for such a meeting?
I've spoken with Barry and with Liz about what happens when something goes from LPC to parks. I think we could create some formality there together to really understand the delineation of park and preserve and when we want something to be a preserve and what protections might be associated with that. That's something that comes to the top of my mind, but we could decide as 2 different committees what all we would want to discuss.
Okay, when might such a meeting occur and what might be the circumstances?
And what do you all think? With what regularity?
Yeah, we could certainly set something up if people in this group are interested. I just think we sort of have we need to work together, sort of keep apprised of what
We all agree.
each other is doing. And so even if it's just, I don't know, twice a year or, a minimal meeting, I think it'd be nice to know what Parks is doing.
Or even a kickoff retreat for really diving in and getting to be acquainted and how we can work together.
You know what Parks is doing? They're having outdoor meetings, special meetings that are outdoors. Public is invited and they are going to the properties, walking the properties, and talking about plans for different places, like maybe 3 or 4 different properties per meeting. So
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, you meet on Wednesdays, second Wednesday?
Yes.
So I wonder if we look at a first Wednesday or first Thursday of the month as a possible time. Either of those times work with all of you if we were to go ahead and imagine it's the same time. What time do you start your meeting?
4.
Okay. Does anybody perceive a conflict in that regard, say with June, first week in June on a Wednesday or Thursday? Might work.
That's good. I don't know what's on my calendar. That's the trouble. I don't carry that in my head.
Well, I'll tell you what, let me contact the chair of your commission and sort of work through what might be on the agenda and when it might work, and so that'll be my task to do.
I will note that it could be interesting to pair it with a Scio outside event and have our meeting, and then folks who wanted to come volunteer outside, we could all go to a preserve and work out there together. So that's an idea. Maybe talk to, email Roy and Rita, our chairs, and
those are on Thursday, right? Thursday afternoons?
yeah,
Those
work
are
out well.
once
That's
a month.
Scio outside is Thursday afternoon.
Yes.
Once a month. Doesn't conflict with this meeting, but it's another Thursday.
What time?
I'll just show you, if you go to sciotownship.org/Scio outside, there's a page with all our events. So you can always be in the loop, but June 15th, we have one 1 to 4 p.m. And then we also meet on Saturdays. Yeah, but we can be in touch about coordinating.
Okay, I think that I have a conflict with that. What is the name of your chair?
Rita Clint
Oh, it's Rita, okay.
And Roy, it's Roy's last name.
Townsend. Sorry, Townsend.
Townsend, Roy Townsend, our co-chairs.
All right. Board of Trustees, I guess you've had a big event. John, last night or night before last?
Yeah, 2 nights ago, we met. Highlights include that we're going to have a special closed session to meet with Bill Stapleton regarding Gelman, because we've got a July 1st deadline to either sue or not sue, and then what's going to happen, in that regard. So it's likely that the state of Michigan and Gelman is going to enter into a consent judgment that may or may not be what we would have negotiated, were we at the table, but we weren't. We're relying on the Eagle to do that, so we're gonna have to talk about what we need to do before July 1st. We also interviewed and hired Joyce Parker for the position of township manager effective early June. Mark Thompson, the interim, was here. Maybe he'll have been here 6 months or so. He'll be transitioning out as he expected to do all along, coming in for 6 months, give or take. Andy presented, I should say Chief Hood from the fire department presented a plan a request to have an architectural drawings, elevations, facades of what a second fire station in Scio Township would likely look like based on the recommendations of the fire committee, which trucks, which apparatus has to go there, that thing. And then, per OHM, Matt Parks, that's something we need to do no matter who designs it. So we need to have an idea of what it's going to look like. That'll be helpful not only for knowing what we want that fire station to look like, but also when the question goes before the voters in the fall, they'll say, this is the kind of thing we're talking about with respect to a second fire station. What else? The Road County Commission has 18, now 19 roads that need work. And what the township board did was they, in a motion that involved various aspects of road funding, it decided to credit any unspent 2013 road SAD funds as soon as practical. They don't write checks for that, but they credit for future taxes. So there'll be a forthcoming credit that's coming for the return of 2013. That was and has been a contentious point as to whether the money can be spent. Some said yes. I said yes, it could be, or I thought it could be, but then the question becomes, can be, should it be? So rather than have dissension and discord all among that for weeks to come, it was decided, it was voted to return the damn thing, whether it's the right thing to do politically or legally, but just return that funds. And then next year in 2024, the issue of a dedicated road millage or a levy, one is would come forward as by way of example only. Not that it would be this much, given our tax base of 1.6 billion. If you were to impose a $0.5 levy, that would generate $800,000 on an annual basis for road improvements and maintenance. And we certainly hope to have a much better idea of how we word it than we did in 2013 with a limited list of roads and what can be done for. So that's it. And then we also decided to use ARPA money to fund the 2023 road, the 2013 road commission list, as well as anything that's kind of in the hopper. That could be the Park Road gravel uplift for the eastern portion that connects between Cedar Bend and Zeeb Road, as well as something that Anna's working on, and that too, and that's the improvements to the Scio Ridge Upland Drive, where there are 4 neighborhoods whose sidewalks stop at their own, and you can look at the sidewalk to the sidewalk across the street, but you can't get there because it just stops, because that's how they did it back in whenever they did it, you know, let the developers off the hook for connect, in my opinion. So they're gonna put pathways in there. There's also AATA bus stops that don't have pads, and in the winter, there's no protection, there's no sidewalks for high school kids who have to walk to the bus stop in the winter to take the bus to either Pioneer High School or community. So it's a tri-part plan that's paths, that's road improvements, where you gotta do the road improvements because of drainage and curbing and all those, you know, paths and road have to kind of coordinate as does, and crosswalks and ADA barriers and ramps, things that nowadays we're concerned with where, you know, 20 years ago they weren't. So that passed, so that was kind of that passed. What else? Fire station. Oh, we declined responsibility for a heritage village wastewater utility system, a private sewer system. That the project itself wasn't passed or denied. That's a future future meeting, but just the declination of the responsibility for the sewer. Other things too, but
Wait a minute. Was that a private sewer or was that a connection to the public sewer?
it's a private sewer because the connection doesn't go that far north.
Right, but so we have denied them the right or.
No, not at all. We haven't, that's Eagle's call, that we're not in that business. Townships, we've said that we don't want to be on the hook for a private sewer system. To the extent that there's a private sewer system that Eagle allows in, then we're saying Scio Township doesn't want to have any part of it. We didn't say no to the sewer system, Marty. I don't want to get too far over my skis with respect to what we can or can't do. We just said, to the extent that one goes in there, not that that's a foregone conclusion, by the way, but to the extent that one goes in there, we're declining responsibility for it.
For maintaining it, or.
For responsibility, it's like.
But I thought that was the whole point of a private one, anyway.
Yeah, but the declination of responsibility is something that they need before they can go to the state. It's part of the, it's like a formality, a pro forma item that has to be done, and we did that.
So we can't say yay yet.
You can say, yeah, I don't know if it, no, depending on your position, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the project itself is TBD, what the board does. Okay. That's it. I don't want to, I mean, a few other things. We didn't get around to because of time. There's going to have to be a decision on a lawnmower, and a commercial lawnmower, and whether or not we spend approximately $10,000 to buy a gas mower, like a commercial mower that we use for the parks and the lawns and things like that, or whether we spend $29,000 for the electric version of it. And, you know, are we going to put our money where our mouth is with respect to carbon neutrality by 2030? Or are we going to save money? And, you know, so there's going to be some discussion around that about, gee, what are you going to be able to get replacement batteries in 15 years for something we buy now? So there's going to be some trade-offs on you know, environmental stewardship, fiscal responsibility, reliability, and that. So that'll be coming up at the next one.
Can we vote to put our cost allocation plan contribution toward that extra?
The thing is, the microphone isn't working right now, and I didn't hear what you said.
Thank you. The next item is Sustainability Task Force. We'd like to report on that.
We are at the point of having a penultimate draft of the report, which will go to the Planning Commission and then around to the BOT. And I'm aware of one part of it, but it's about 50 pages long, and I think it's on the website to be observed. However, I would warn you that there are to be major changes in the grasslands section, I know. Well, and also the waters, and also agriculture section, which is the one that the three of us are involved with. Because we got the draft, and of course, there were changes.
Okay. Do you have a,
We're working on a penultimate,
do you have a deadline for a final draft?
there is one, and it fortunately got extended, and I've forgotten what date.
Yeah, I
There-
think
there
it
was
might
one.
be May 25th. Jan Culbertson is turning it in.
But hasn't that date been extended till sometime in
I think
June?
that's the extended date. I think it was, I don't know, 18th or something like that. That's been extended. At
Oh.
any rate, we can get to that, but
So
it's
is the
at the end
idea,
of the month.
the board would be asked to adopt that?
I think it goes first to the planning commission
Oh, okay.
with their FYI, and then after them, it goes on to the board. So,
All right, thank you. Next item, old business, is the Buy, Protect, Sell Committee Policy Draft. I understand you've met and you've produced a document, and the intention here is to vote on it, is that correct?
Well,
Discuss
just,
it?
or just discuss. I
Okay.
mean, we just, we met Friday. Did all of you get a chance to review this?
Yeah,
So these are just things we identified in conversation as, and Barry brought the three possible properties to us. Because I don't know what is available and really suitable for farming. So we had the Van Curler, Mercer and Sykert that we considered. And then we just came up during conversation with these things that need to be considered before any decision on a particular piece of property. And again, I said, in this draft, it says, in no particular order, because these came up just during conversation, but we did not try to prioritize. And so any comments or any thoughts or,
clarification.
yes,
So these are properties that Scio owns, and two might come up for consideration.
well, Scio owns, as I understand it, only Marshall and Sykert, wholly owned by Scio. The others are all, isn't that what you said? The others are all owned with partners, or
Well, there's only one other, Dan Krill, right?
Right, and Marshall does not have any farmland.
Marshall doesn't have farmland on it, but
Van
there are only
Curler.
2 properties in the township that are owned only by Scio Township and purchased with Scio funds alone.
Correct.
And those would be, so as you see in one of these bullet points here, if we had partners that helped us purchase one of these properties, we'd have, before any sale or lease, we'd have to get their okay on it. So, and, we went through those 3 properties, and Van Curler and Mercero have no road access. So that's really hard for someone to come in. I mean, there's no way. So a neighbor could farm those properties. If we wanted to say, the best way to manage the invasives is by farming. A neighbor could do it, if a neighbor did it sustainably and that sort of thing. Otherwise, they're really not suitable for farming.
I guess this passed over my head, and I don't know why, that the Buy, Protect, Sell refers only to farming. In other words, there can't be if a person doesn't want to sell, doesn't want to farm, he doesn't even isn't a candidate.
Well, I think we could probably do an RFP for natural area and open space if we wanted to do that or not.
I suppose, but chances are, if it's naturally or open space, we're gonna buy it and keep it.
Okay, all right.
And you to end the two.
So is that right, what Marty said? This is kind of new ground that we're
Yeah,
plowing
I
through.
it's a
so-
logical criteria,
Yeah.
but it just never passed my brain.
I agree. It seems short-sighted just to think about preserving land if it's appropriate. I mean, is it farm or park? Like, is that the only?
Would somebody buy a piece just to have a garden or a playground or something to look at, or would we allow this?
For the tree canopy for urban offset?
I mean, is it conceivable that somebody applies to us that has a scrub piece of ground? It's not a great,
Or wooded ground?
Yeah, but I think if it's got any, size or ecological value, then we're gonna keep that. But if it was, say 12 acres, if it's got kind of scrub growth on it, and it might be wetlands, and not really suitable for much public involvement, in terms of, being able to visit it, that it's potentially conceivable, and it's not farmland.
Yeah.
It's potentially conceivable that we could say, we'll acquire this, but then we're gonna conserve it and then flip it to somebody else, if somebody would want to buy that. But most often, I would think it's gonna be properties that
Most
have
often,
farmland
yeah.
on it.
Okay. But I agree, it seems like it'd be good to have some wiggle room.
Yeah, and I had a general question about one of the criterion, which is this idea of the value of making affordable land available to farmers. And I was trying to figure out whose responsibility is it to determine the value of any piece of land for farming, for a preserve, for a park, or for tree canopy, or for just open green space for birds and,
Right.
other life to live in. Who is that where the master planning process looks at the value of our land in the township?
No, it's all done by real estate appraisal.
Okay,
So we hire somebody to tell us what the value of property is if we're gonna buy it, or the value of the development rights if we're just gonna conserve it that way.
but that's the Land Preservation Commission. It's this commission's responsibility to be looking at land and its value generally for these different uses.
So if we're gonna be involved in a property, we commission an appraisal. It's a recommendation that comes from the LPC. It's a small expense. The supervisor can sign the proposal. It doesn't need to go to the board of trustees. And then the report comes back to me and I share it with you all. And I say, here's the value for this property. We say, is it something we wanna go ahead and pursue? And for a property, like the Wren's Farm, where we have, there's farming on the property, and it's not one that we're gonna retain ownership of because it's mostly farmland. The appraisal says this is the value of the land before the easement's in place, this is the value of the land after the easement's in place. We're paying the difference, that's the development rights. And then the remainder, something around $3,500 an acre, is the value of the property after the easement's in place. And so that's what in the Wren's example, we said, that's the price. We're not gonna go into a bidding process, where somebody says, I can pay you $1 million for that, and we said, no, that's $330,000. That's your price. Tell us what you're gonna do with the land, not how much money do you got. And if we follow that process, and then the appraisal will establish the value of the property.
And the process for that evaluation though is only triggered when there's something to purchase, I guess. Was that?
Correct.
Okay, and I guess what I'm getting at is in the sustainability plan, we are setting goals for carbon neutrality that include having more open space for a bunch of different reasons. And I guess that's where I'm just not understanding the relationship between these different groups, parks, sustainability, preservation, in terms of understanding like overall the land we have, and what if we are like, from a vision perspective, we're saying like, oh, we should be aiming for this amount of land to go toward farming if possible, but here's what we have to work with. Or here's the tree canopy amount we're really aiming for, and here's what we have to work with. Are you the map maker and the person that has like the data and information for, like, again, like how would we, anyways, I don't want to take us down a rabbit hole, but I'm just trying to understand. I don't have a clear sense. So every time I'm asked to evaluate one piece of property, I don't understand the bigger picture, and I'm the kind of person that needs to understand the bigger picture of how us making a decision about one piece of property kind of fits into
A master
a
plan.
master plan for our land use.
Let me
That would
find
be-
one thing I've been working with our guide to get a picture of the township. and let's talk about trees. He gets satellite images, and so he can get a satellite image of the township. And we can look at it and say, and make a set of criterion, but look at, okay, what sections of the township seem to have adequate trees? What sections of the township are below what looks right? And wouldn't we like to have more trees in this area? Don't we think it's appropriate? And then property comes available within the section of the township that we think is deficient. That might be a way in which tree canopy would become something.
So that's part of the puzzle, but we do need to communicate with the parks, preserves and pathways group and perhaps other groups, because if a piece of property comes up, right, what do we do with it? That's what you're asking. And we do need to have, you know, there's those 3 pieces of ground that we have right now that Liz referred to, you know, the sacred pieces, the Mercer Road, the yeah.
So,
Those were,
yeah, go ahead, Tim, sorry.
well, we just got to determine the best use of that with all of the directives and needs of the township considered, you know, including the task force. And, you know, I'm looking out for, personally, I think it's my duty to look out for the food system and good farms locally. But, you know, we need to put all that in the mix and decide. And that was to some degree what we tried to do with the.
Yeah.
this.
And for context, the only reason this is coming up now is that I see is that Stephanie and Aaron Cohen came to us and made a proposal for a piece of property. Otherwise, the only time we have used this buy protect sell policy so far is on the Wren's farm, which had been farmed and was suitable for farming. And the township didn't, you know, wanted to let a farmer use it, you know, let a farmer have it. So that was easy. Now we're coming up with all these other very good questions. And so among these bullet points are that we must consult with parks and consult with the sustainability group, your group, to answer these questions. We just can't, it's not an LPC question alone. It's a whole township-wide plan that this needs to fit into. And it's a lot easier if we see a piece of property that's already been farmed and we say, well, we'd like to buy this, but we don't want to own it. It's not really suitable for a park or preserve. We'd like to sell it. And that's, so it's a lot
So we see
easier.
ourselves as an enabling.
Yeah. So I really didn't, I mean, to me, I would not look at Van Curler or Mercero or Syker for that matter and say, well, can we farm these? Because we didn't buy them. You know, for that reason, we bought them for the parks people so that they could be available to the public. But I guess those were the ones that we could consider in this context because they would be, you know, they could possibly be farmed. They're open field.
But I'm looking at the Mercero property, and so it doesn't have farmland, and the township owns it.
It has some old field.
Yeah, but the township owns the property, right?
Correct.
So we're just gonna continue that the township has some property, is that?
We certainly could.
For wild areas, for animals and trees and,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, so it's worthy
Yeah.
stating that as an objective.
It's
Absolutely.
a matter of just having a conversation about, okay, so we bought this property. Do we just let it go, you know, fallow and have it grow up to trees and shrubs and so forth? Or do we try to maintain it as a grassland area for certain, you know, other benefits? Or do we farm it? Or, you know, what are the options involved with that?
Do we have to pay taxes on that?
No, not
On
if we're,
Mercero?
not if we're not generating some sort of revenue off it, like renting the land out for farming.
Okay.
Then that changes the picture.
So is that the same for Van Curler?
It would be, but those lands have all been idle since we bought them. There's been no activity, no
So
farming.
none of our partners are are responsible for taxes on them either.
Correct. It's owned by the township and which is a tax exempt organization. And ideally, we make them properly accessible to the public and nobody squawks. If you bought something and it wasn't accessible, then there might be some case to make that maybe you should be paying taxes on it if you're not making it accessible. So we're gonna make it accessible and
Yeah.
we'll quiet. And I've not heard that, but somebody could make that argument.
So I'm understanding, Liz, that you are kind of biased toward not making available land, which we didn't preconceive as something we would eventually sell for agriculture or other use. Rather, we bought it without that in mind. And now, looking forward, it's a more complicated process, which adds time and effort for us to reevaluate all the RFPs. And I'm wondering if indeed, this is what we want to get into, is if we're gonna do it in advance, Buy, Protect, Sell sort of worked for rents. That was the way we were going to be able to acquire that property and not spend all of our money on the full purchase price. But we're getting into a more complicated thing. We put all the work into evaluating RFPs, and then where does the money go? We don't really know that yet, do we? Whether it comes back to LPC, because we don't own the property. So how can we sell something we don't own? Goes to the Board of Trustees General Fund? Is that the likely?
Well, that's one of
Direction?
the questions here. Can we decide that Buy, Protect, Sell applies only to new properties that we're acquiring that are suitable for farming, that we want to keep as open space, but also want to keep available to young farmers who can't otherwise afford property? I mean, maybe we could just use Buy, Protect, Sell on an ongoing basis and not look back and keep these spaces
For increasing the
for the
farming.
public use for township residents.
So it's part of the original plan and the purchase is it's going to be sold back. Is that what you're thinking rather than in
I mean, that's
retrospect?
just I'm
Let's
throwing it out
reevaluate.
there.
Yeah.
So I have a question. We have a policy of this already, right? In some-
Yeah, Buy, Protect, Sell, yes.
And it says it's for the protection of agricultural lands. Now, what does agricultural mean? Does that mean farming? Or does it mean ranching? But does it have to be currently used in agriculture that we want to protect? Or can we buy land and make it agriculture? And what is it meant by agriculture?
Do you want to answer that, Mary?
I'll take a shot at that, John. And I think it means land that is suitable for agriculture and not land that's got a bunch of trees that you gotta clear and, as an extreme example. But land that's been used in agriculture for some time.
Does that mean farming or is agriculture?
I would say it's
a broad-
the state's broad definition of what agriculture
Could that be
is.
strawberries?
Yeah.
Could you have hemp? Could you have
Yeah.
sunflowers? Could you have?
That's all
Christmas trees.
That's all agriculture?
Christmas trees,
Cows.
all agriculture.
That's all
Goats.
farming.
Yeah,
It's all farming.
Okay.
In our conservation easements, one of the permitted uses is agricultural use, and we just plug in the state's definition, which is,
Pretty
15,
broad.
yeah, it's pretty much everything except managing a woodlot. It's all
Okay.
kinds of animals, all kinds of crops.
Well, in order to move along here, I'm gonna ask you, Liz, what would you think we could do to move this along or add our imprimatur to it to help clarify the issue?
I think it's important that we talk about it in light of the Cohen proposal, because they did come to us with a proposal. We said we have never considered this property for Buy, Protect, Sell. We have now considered it. I think it's important for this group to discuss it for sure, and we could, I guess, adopt something like this. I mean, what do you all think? And say, these are the things that would have to be considered before any decision to offer another property that the township owns. That includes talking with the parks people. That includes, running it by the sustainability people to see if it fits with the plan for the township. It includes answering the question, is it legal or not to transfer property purchased with taxpayer funds, which is a question that I don't know the answer to. We could say, you know, these things have to be considered, but I don't think it's time necessarily to pass anything to the board.
No, I agree. And we did do this in one case, I'll remind people, with the piece of the Mercer Road property that we bought just over here. We bought 34 acres, but 8 acres has this, you know, giant pole barn on it that we didn't want. And so we kept the 26 acres of old field and woods, and then divided off the 8 acres with the pole barn, made it available to the 2 neighbors, asked them for proposals, chose one of them, sold it to the Levines, subject to a conservation easement. So we bought the property for whatever it was, 10,000 an acre. And the condition of the sale to them was that they would immediately convey a conservation easement on the property after the sale. If they didn't do that, then the sale wouldn't go through. That was the deal. So we sold it to them for $3,000, and then they turned around and conveyed a conservation easement. So they own it, but it is conserved. It's only available for agricultural use. There's a building envelopes that can construct other agricultural buildings on the property. So that's a precedent that we've already completed.
But that property was only available to the neighbors because they're the only ones that had access to it.
Correct.
Right? So that's a different situation.
Everything's different. Every situation is different, but yes, correct.
Yeah.
Well, I wonder if we can take the policy as it stands and offer
Just-
parks, pathways, and preserves the opportunity to consider it, and sustainability to consider it, and anybody else who might want to comment before we actually, you know, formalize it in some way that we can present to someone who's a prospective agriculturalist who would like to use it.
Well, we'd have buy, protect, sell in place.
Right. So
The board's
as a
adopted.
preconceived notion in obtaining a property, that works.
Yeah, this is what
This
I
is-
would show to someone like the Collins who came in with a proposal. These are the things we consider when determining whether a particular piece of property is suitable or not. So that we're not just saying, well, you know, we've never thought of this before. I want it to be so that we have thought of it. And we have some things that are considerations that we will stick to.
Well, could you, in the form of a motion, suggest what we can do to move this then?
Well, I'm just gonna suggest that we transmit it to Anna for the Parks Group, transmit it to Janine, right? Or Marty or Tim?
Marty, but I think it should go to Jan.
Jan, okay.
Jan
So I don't know if
Corbett,
I have her contact information. I probably do somewhere.
I do.
Okay. And then just have you all consider this and just see what you think. Can
Well,
start
we may be
there?
able to do that informally, to just do it
Sure.
rather
Oh, yeah, I
than by
think so.
some, you know,
Yeah.
motion, a claim.
I think so.
So will you distribute then?
Yeah.
And
Okay.
I would-
Anything to add or anything that you think that we have left off or?
You can
Don't-
maybe send comments to you. We can
Yeah,
send
you can
comments to
do
you.
that also. if we
All
want.
right.
Move on. Yeah.
I mean, overall, this seemed very comprehensive. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sure, well, exactly, yeah.
A lot of work
Yeah.
went into this.
Yeah.
We want the
Thank
input.
you. Sorry.
That's.
Okay, all right. So if we can, we're
Wait,
getting
John, did you have
a
something?
little tight. Oh,
No, we're tight on time. I can bring it up later.
Okay.
And I see that Fazio has joined us here, so I'm gonna suggest that we jump to that item on the agenda.
Let's do
if that's
that.
okay?
All right, you want to explain where we are with this
Yeah.
particular proposition?
Joe,
Barry?
can you hear us?
I can. Good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me?
Hello.
Yes, we can. Oh, look, I can see you too. So let me give you just a little background on where we stand with this. So this is a property, and Joe, by the way, I did talk with Riser about this, and the conclusion was that we thought that this matter should be handled in open session.
Okay. Just wanted to broach the idea. That's
I
all.
appreciate that.
Mhm.
And for those of you who don't know, Joe is our real estate attorney, who I consult with whenever we're doing deals. And he's been a terrific resource for us.
Thank you, Barry.
So we are under contract to purchase a conservation easement on about 23 acres of property. It's at the northeast corner of West Delhi and Miller Road. Some of you saw this a while ago, and some of you have not seen it, but you've driven past it. You know what I'm talking about.
Several times.
This is basically 23 acres of woods. It's part of several parcels that are owned by the same person, by the name of Tom Burnham. And Mr. Burnham applied to our program some time ago. We entered into an agreement with him in 2020. And I noted driving by recently that there's been a for sale sign out there for a while, but on the top of it, it says sale pending. And so Mr. Burnham had 3 mortgages that were on the property, and whenever we're seeking to purchase a conservation easement, those mortgages either need to be discharged or they need to be subordinated so that the interest of the conservation easement is primary. And we do that because if the easement was not primary and there was a foreclosure on the property, the easement would not apply anymore. So either they need to be discharged, that is paid off, or just removed from the title, or subordinated to our interests. So it goes to the title to the property, the conservation easement, and then any other encumbrances like a mortgage thereafter. So Mr. Burnham was charged with clearing those mortgages off the books. And for the last 3 years, I have been in fairly regular contact with him, just checking in to see where things stand. One of the mortgages was that he granted from personal funds, so that could be subordinated fairly easily. One of them took a court proceeding to complete, but he did go through that process and had that mortgage discharged, so it's no longer part of the title. And the third one was from another party, and that was also a lengthy and difficult process. With an uncooperative lender. And so I've been, checking in with Tom, over the months and years to see where things stand. My last communication with him was in October of last year, at which he said he was still trying to have that last mortgage addressed. And neither he nor I have had, any endeavors at contact since then until I saw the sign saying sale pending, and I emailed him and said, "What's up?" Got no response. Called him on the phone, left a message, got no response. Called the listing agent. And she said, "Oh, I had no idea that you had a purchase agreement for this property." Tom didn't say anything about that. And he said something about that he endeavored to work out something with us, but it didn't come to fruition. And so it was assumed, apparently, at least by the listing agent, that it was the agreement was no longer valid. I note in the agreement under paragraph 13, closing, purchaser and seller shall close this transaction no later than July 30th of 2020, but in no event prior to the satisfaction of all conditions precedent referenced in section 12, and so forth, unless purchaser elects to waive any of such conditions precedent. So we never had this kind of thing happen before. And that's what I called Joe, and we had a good conversation about it last week. And then I thought it's best for him to address you all directly in terms of what kinds of options that we have available to us at this time. Joe.
So thank you, Barry, for that, I think, quite accurate description of where we're at. The obvious issue that the Preservation Committee needs to decide is whether you wish to continue to pursue the acquisition of the conservation easement rights arising under the contract. And if that is, in fact, the direction to do so, then you need to assert those rights relatively quickly and in writing. I will point out, as Barry pointed out, that the contract itself calls for a closing in July of 2020. So it's been quite a few years since the contract was signed. There may be some fact questions relating to the continued binding effect of the agreement, certainly from the seller's perspective. But the fact that he was moving forward to resolve the title issues as recently as last October seems to suggest to me that certainly he was operating under the assumption that the contract was still in place. If you wish to take the position that the seller has defaulted under their obligations, there is a mechanism for asserting a remedy against the seller under Section 18 of the agreement, which would be a termination of the agreement and a demand for reimbursement of costs up to, I think, $5,000 for due diligence expenses. That's kind of the basic outline. There are, nobody has reached out to Mr. Burnham to find out whether or not he intends to continue to perform this agreement. The fact that he signed a contract with a third party suggests that he has made that decision, but never informed the township as to what his thoughts were on that contract. I'm assuming, Barry, that there's been no other written communications between you and Mr. Burnham. Certainly, I'm not aware of any relating to the contract and the parties' commitments and obligations arising under those agreements. But I do think a strong argument can be made that his sale of the lands to a third party is a breach of his obligations.
And Joe, you also told me last week when we had a conversation that if that sale to a third party occurs before we take any action, then our opportunities through the purchase agreement are nullified.
Well, I wouldn't, let's put it this way, your ability to seek specific performance of the obligation to sell would be waived or difficult to enforce in that context. So you would still be able to make a claim for the damages if that transaction closed, but I do think time is of the essence for the committee to make a decision whether it wishes to pursue this and enforce its rights and engage in discussions with Mr. Burnham as to what his position is, since I don't think we really have a clear explanation as to why he entered into the third party contract. But that's correct. If the other deal closes without us asserting our rights, then our position is weakened substantially.
He's been endeavoring to sell the property in its entirety for some time now, and finally found a buyer. And the purchase price, at least the listing price, is hefty, north of $2 million. So he's finally found a buyer for it.
So he could afford to pay our damages.
He could also proceed with the conservation easement. That is another option he could choose to do.
Well, we don't know the nature or his contractual obligations under the other contract at this point, but he may find himself in a situation where he's committed himself to two different buyers, excuse me.
One for a conservation easement and one for the fee simple interest.
Correct.
Gary, when it's my turn, I have a question.
Go, it's your
Hey,
turn now.
Joe, it's Riser. How are you, sir?
I'm well, John. I'm well.
On the computer. So were we to buy fee simple, or we were to just get a conservation easement?
The latter.
Conservation only, yes.
So he might not be doing anything to us. He might be selling it, letting the buyer know that, hey, you're not gonna get fee simple, you're gonna get it subject to the Scio Township having a conservation easement, right?
That is a possibility. That is correct, John.
But that's not,
I thought Barry said that it was not, that she was selling it as.
the listing agent had no awareness of any such contract or
Okay, all
pursuit.
right.
So I'm guessing the answer to that is no.
And have we filed anything, we haven't filed a list pendants or anything of that nature, correct?
Nope.
We have not filed a list pendants, which, John, as you know, of course, can only be filed if we file a lawsuit to commence an action, nor have we filed evidence of record of the existence of our purchase agreement and the ongoing efforts to try to resolve the title issues. I will also point out that under the contract, he is contractually obligated to resolve these mortgages mandatorily. He doesn't have a discretion as to whether or not he solves those problems.
So is the ask going to be of this body, LPC, which is advisory to the BOT? Or is this something that should be a Board of Trustee action item on the next available Board of Trustee agenda?
I would say the latter upon recommendation of the LPC.
Okay. So we need to light a fire potentially under the BOT's keister, legal term, if this is something that we want to do to protect whatever Scio's interest is.
I agree, John, that is ultimately where we need to be at, but I would suggest that maybe a properly worded communication to Mr. Burnham now asking for his confirmation of what his obligations are relative to the sale of this contract
You never, just reach out, ask them and say, hey buddy, what's up?
Yeah, exactly right. We may not have a pissing contest. We may.
Okay.
And I did endeavor to do that a couple of weeks ago, got no response.
By email or mail?
Email and a phone message.
Well, maybe he would listen to Joe a little better.
So the next step is to engage Jody.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. I don't have any more questions.
All right, well,
That's a good next step.
I think we should ask Joe then to send a letter.
I can certainly do that. It'll go out, if not tomorrow, Monday at the latest.
All right, can we all agree upon that as an action?
Yes.
And Joe, just out of courtesy, could you CC the township's general attorney, Jim Fink, on that? Just to get a heads up, and Mark Thompson, the township manager. We're trying to rein in attorneys and everybody talks to their attorney and have things done. So let Mark Thompson, the township manager, in on the loop. Let Jim Fink in on the loop. So, then they can share it with the BOT. I'll certainly let them know as well. And maybe give them a courtesy copy, please, and thank you.
Absolutely be glad to do that.
Any other questions for Joe?
I think we all agree that this is the next step. Thank you, Joe.
It's my pleasure.
Thanks, Joe.
Anything else for me, gentlemen, ladies?
Nope.
Great. I will sign off.
Thanks, man.
Thank you. Bye.
Oh, good thing for noticing that was sale pending and looking into it. That's crazy.
All right, well, that was, I think we're doing the right thing.
And he's just disappeared. He's just not answering.
And I want to just apologize. Was it Pam Boyd? Somebody just got here. Pat Stein. I just want to apologize to the person. I either just let Pam or Pat in.
Pam was already here.
So then I let Pam in belatedly. Sorry, Pam. Thanks for your patience.
All right, we have an addition here of an item that Tim wanted to discuss.
Thanks, Will. First, regarding that property at West Stillhigh. Miller. We want to just conserve it, right, and have it be open space.
Yeah.
And we've got the right to pursue that, and that's what this is all about. Okay,
That's correct.
Just trying to be clear.
It's there's some mature woods in the north part of it, a small area, like 6 acres or something like that, and then the rest of it's kind of scrub woods today. But if we're interested in tree cover and habitat and all those kinds of things, there's value to it. And I think it was before the recession, many years ago, there was an approved site plan for a residential development to cover the substantial part of that property. And those plans, died off, and then in subsequent years, Mr. Burnham applied to the program. We went out and visited, we did our usual stuff, we decided to move ahead with an easement purchase on it, but not to buy it outright.
Right. Okay. So, and that purchase of conservation easement is on this document that I gave to all you guys. John, you have that? Do you have this little spreadsheet?
And before you go any further, there was a comment earlier about being able to share this document with the public as part of the packet. I would say we can do that once we redact some of the names that are on it.
Once we
Yeah.
process
Right.
out.
I
So
just
should we
realized that now.
save this for closed session?
No, I think it's an open session matter, but in terms of sharing the information, a revised version should be
Okay, all right,
produced. Just we delete the names of properties that are under consideration.
sure. Property 1, 2, 3, 4, okay.
Burnham, we can mention because we're under contract for that.
Can you send me a one with the names off of it?
Yeah.
Thank you. Great.
Yes. So this is just a projection of how much money basically we're gonna have to use for acquiring pieces of property, right? So, and it goes into the future 12 years because that's our current, agreement to tax the South Township people. So basically we get $600,000 a year from that, and that'll increase a little bit incrementally every year because the property values increase. And so I don't want to get too specific about this right now. We'll earn a little bit of interest on whatever money we got in the bank, and that's basically the money that we have to spend. And then, whatever it costs to take care of pieces of property, to buy them. So I've got some entries on here that you can see for the next 3 years, but beyond that, we don't know what's going to happen. And depending on what does happen, it influences how much money we got to spend. And that's basically it, because basically every meeting that it comes into my consciousness that we got to have a budget. We need to know how much money down the line we've got, and what we're going to be able to do with it. So,
And we do know that at a very basic level.
yeah,
Where I've just told y'all, we're getting 600 grand a year and we got 12 years, so that's $7 million available.
Yeah.
Tim's, done a detailed analysis of that and thought about, money coming in, money going out, just sort of to give you a better idea of what we'll have available in any 1 year over the course of the next 12.
more detailed, yeah, and it needs fixing. There's some entries here, John, if you're gonna take a look at this. You don't have to look at it.
I have it right here, don't I?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah. no.
yeah, there's some entries that just, need to be worked on a little bit, but this is a start. It's a working document. It's gonna change every year. But if we keep it up, it'll be useful for us.
Thanks for doing this.
Yeah.
That's really helpful.
So it tails off, our net end of year balance tails off considerably. And of course, we don't know really 3 years or 4 years or 5 or 10 years in advance, but is it all troubling to you that it looks like we only have $2,000 left in fiscal year 2031? I mean, should we read anything into this in terms of the analytical capacity of it?
Yeah, I mean, we don't necessarily want to have money in the bank, right?
That's right.
We're not a saving group here.
We're being taxed for money in the bank, basically.
There's that. But I mean, with the exception of, we want to have we don't want to have $2,000 in the bank when the April farm comes up for $2.3 million. And when that came up for sale, we had that money, we had 2.1 million in the bank, basically. And it was a $200,000 general fund loan to complete that transaction. But if we had $2,000, we'd be in a tough
That
spot.
comes into play when we know there's something a year out, maybe 2 years out there, we're gonna need a big chunk of dough for, then we are less aggressive the current year, perhaps.
Yeah, but things do also pop up unexpectedly. Like, we had no
Right.
idea that was going to come up, and we jumped on it. We had the money, and we closed in a few months' time. So,
But we do have $1.9 million to start with at the beginning of this fiscal year, which begins in April 1st and runs for 12 months. And added to that will be the $600,000 of tax revenue for this current fiscal year. That's why it looks large now.
so we got 1.9 million approximately since we got the RENS money back again after 10 and a half months of trying. Plus what we had from the most recent collection that finished in February, and then some money left over. 1.9 million is more or less what we have available to us right now. And then as Tim said, the next tax collection, that goes out in the winter tax bill, so it'll hit your mailboxes around about the 1st of December, and then people pay that over the next couple of months. And so by the end of February, certainly, but then by the end of certainly by the fiscal year, March 31st, we'll have that new 600,000 or more or less available. So in this fiscal year, it's basically, 2.5 million. but right now in hand is 1 point.
Yeah, Tim, I appreciate you laying all this out. I think this lines up from a money perspective to what I was trying to communicate, and probably not very well earlier, about how my brain works in terms of, kind of our meta responsibility for working with this money toward our vision and mission. So like the criteria that you all shared in that policy helps me think about, okay, what are our goals and how are we balancing out any micro decision to spend 100,000 here or $1 million there relative to what, we're trying to do longer, over this time period, and I understand that things come up. We don't, like, some of this we don't actually have any control over, right? Or have, some control over, but not entire control over. So do we have like in terms of mission and goals, do we have, I know you've got like a set of properties that are mapped out, right? For I don't remember the name. Priorities, okay. So if I wanna get a better sense of like what might our priorities be over this time frame, I should be looking at that map.
Yes.
And getting a better understanding of that from a bigger picture perspective, and then as we've got these individual choices coming up, that's for me and my needs, I can be trying to look at these individual decisions against kind of that bigger
That would
picture.
be helpful for me too, and I would love it if Scio Township could possibly provide us all with nice print copies of that.
I think is it in the pros plan?
Yeah, it is, that's why I printed it for today, because it's like, I that's so useful. I was also just trying to open up the Scio Township Master Land Use Plan, but I can't get it to open on the website. Because it's nice to plan.
Yeah, and I this is homework I can do on my own, but I also, so thanks for letting me name that connection between money and mission.
Yeah, Barry, maybe you could, for our next meeting, get nice color prints of the updated map of the properties
The priority.
to share, yeah.
Yeah, and we have them from a couple of years ago, and other than maybe a couple of acquisitions.
We can note
But
the
the pros
changes.
plan,
pretty
doesn't
close.
the pros plan have the up-to-date one or not? I guess not, of our high priority property.
I would think it does not.
Okay, no, I think you're right.
All right, good ideas, thank you. We're getting a little behind things here.
Yeah, we're right on time. We're good.
You feel you've got enough time at this point?
Half an hour for closed session, I think is perfect.
Okay, well, we still have open session, of course, for you. Are
Oh, that's right. Yep. I can make that pretty quick because there's nothing to say there because we've already talked about the Burnham property. Just a couple of quick things. One is that the ongoing saga with the Lake Erie RCPP continues. There will not be an application round, sooner. The target is still the fall at this point. And, for those of you who don't remember or don't know, this is a pot of money that the Greenbelt program led the charge on, got some $7.4 million dedicated to local partners to purchase conservation easements on farmland and natural area properties. The funds were committed 18 months ago. The process for us being able to apply for them and access those funds is still in process. 18 months later, it's been very frustrating for the city staff people who have been involved with it, less so for me because I'm not so directly involved, although we have properties that we're ready to use this money on. There's one in particular we'll talk about in closed session. I just thought, let's go ahead and do this one. It's not that much money and we'll have partners and, why wait for this federal money to do that? So hopefully we can apply it to future properties instead. We keep hacking away at it and hopefully someday that money will be available to us with the Greenbelt program in Washington County and Ann Arbor Township, Webster Township, and all the local partners that we have. And then also, I'll discuss this a bit more in the closed session in terms of particular properties, but the special round for the federal agricultural conservation easement program funding that we've talked about a bit in the last couple of meetings did actually get posted a couple of weeks ago with a May 26th deadline. So I'm looking at submitting 2 properties to that program. This is the one that's usually once a year, and this past year it was in the fall, in November, I believe. But for the first time in quite a long time, there was more funding available than there was demand. That is, it was 1.5 million or something available, and less than that being requested. And so there was that money sort of left over, and then I think either some ARPA money or something else came in, and it totaled up to be $900,000 of federal funds, which can be as much as half of the price of the development rights. So, $1.8 million worth of easement purchases overall.
And you'll identify the properties in closed session.
That's correct, yeah.
And what program was that that you're, what is the name of the program?
It's still the ACEP.
Oh, AZ.
Yep, so they decided to do a special application round, due in a couple of weeks. So we're looking at submitting 2 properties for that we'll talk about in closed session. So that's all for my open session report.
And let me point out that when we go after a piece of property and we seek out partners to help fund it, that could be a significant piece in determining the use of that property.
That, and also, Tim's table shows you what dollars we have, what dollars that we're, scheduled to obtain over the next, 12 years or so. But what this doesn't reflect is the kinds of matching funds that we get. So this is what we got. We have 2 cases where we acted alone. Almost never though. I mean, in 20 and whatever it is, almost 30 acquisition projects that we've completed, there's only been 2 where we paid the entire purchase price ourselves. So in all other cases, and then, the Ren's one is a great example. It was a $3 million project, but we paid, I think it was 19% of it, something like that. So this is not the only funding that will go toward these acquisitions. And over the almost 20 years now, this program has been in effect, that it's been $1.50 of outside money for every dollar that we put into it. So
Right.
I don't see any reason why that would not continue. So just in terms of your thinking, it's like, yeah, we got 1.9 million, but that means we got likely more than that.
So the numbers on this budget, call it, will be just what we're responsible for.
Yep.
All right. Next item we always deal with before closed session is attendance at the next meeting, which is June 8th. Anybody not likely to be available for that meeting?
I just learned I have a business trip. That day. I mean, I gotta go to Arkansas,
Okay.
so I can try to join for the open session via Zoom, but I won't be available for the closed session. Yeah,
Via
She can
Zoom,
listen
so
in.
Yeah, you can listen in.
I can listen in, yeah.
as long as we have a
Sounds like we will. All right, good.
I also have a kind of a follow-up motion on the last item, if you would allow it, and I want to think about it. Because we're asking the attorney to reach out, and we kind of asked him, but we didn't take a vote on it. So I think we might want to formalize our request, since it involves spending money, it involves asking him to do something on behalf of us. So I have a model motion that I'm not going to be offended if somebody wants to amend it. But I would move that council for the LPC communicate with the owner of the Burnham parcel, in which Scio Township has an agreement to purchase a conservation easement, regarding the status and potential sale of the parcel, and to include Scio Township Attorney James Fink and Township Manager Mark Thompson on that communication.
I support that. And can I have the little thing?
Okay, any further discussion of that?
Sticky note, yes.
I think if there's no further discussion, we can vote on it. All in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous. Okay, thank you. Thank you for bringing that up, John.
Thank you, John.
That's a good point.
All right, anything more in open session before we go into closed session? All right, motion to go into closed session, please.
So we need a motion to go into closed session to discuss pending property evaluations.
Support.
And support, okay, Tim and Marty.
All right.
And then we need,
Do a roll call?
okay, yep, Janine,
Here,
yes.
yes. I'm still here, and yes.
Good, both. Marty,
Yes.
John,
Yes?
Lisa,
Yes.
Jim,
Yes.
Will,
Yes,
and I'm yes.
okay. See you, Anna, thank you.
Bye, Anna.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Pam. Grab my stuff.
You're welcome.
So I'm gonna
Bye, Anna.
try to
Good to
do
meet
this
you.
right.
Yeah, nice to meet you too.
I'm gonna try to, I just stopped the recording, is that what I do?
Yes, you should stop it.
Definitely stop the recording,
Okay.
and that may be sufficient.
Yeah.
And make sure there's no one still hanging on there.
It's nice to be at an LPC meeting for the first time.
Joe Fazio.
Thank you.
Recording stopped.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Am I covered or I don't take people out, do I?
Yeah, you do.
And then they just log on back?
They can if we have any actions that we want to take back in open session.
Well, how the hell do they know whether we do or we don't?
Agenda.
Okay, do we have anything, do we have anything or no?
Well, it depends on whether there's something we discuss in closed session that we have to, I mean,
All right.
that's a good question.
All
Yeah,
right, hey Jonathan, if we do, I'll text you. That like, hey, we're gonna take a vote on something.
You can also watch the recording.
but I,
Later.
Yeah,
Okay, okay. All right.
Being later, after.
after the meeting's
Yeah.
been done and it's posted, and you can go back and check the last 3 minutes of the meeting or whatever.
Right.
See if there's any actions taken.
Okay.
Thanks, John.
Is everyone off, John?
No, not yet.
Sometimes people just let it run and they're not attendant.
Yeah, I know.
But nevertheless.